Usually split into two camps when it comes to taxes. One side says, the government is robbing us. The other says, without taxes, civilization would collapse. But here's the interesting part. Neither side is completely wrong. Today, I'm not just going to explain what taxes are. We're going to talk about why the government is involved in almost every part of your life, from the coffee you buy in the morning to the moment you plug your phone in to charge at night. And by the end of this video, there's a good chance the way you look at taxes will change a little. You wake up in the morning, you unplug your phone. There's tax on electricity. You buy a coffee. There's tax on the coffee. You leave the house. There's tax on gasoline. You go to the grocery store. There's tax on the products you buy. If you smoke, taxes. If you drink alcohol, even more taxes. You buy a car, and suddenly it feels like the government paid more for it than you did. You earn a salary, and money gets taken out before it even reaches your hands. At some point, people start asking themselves, am I working for myself? Or did I accidentally start a business partnership with the government? Because taxes are one of the strangest things in human life. Nobody wants to pay them voluntarily, yet everyone wants to live inside a system funded by them. And the ironic part is this. Even people who hate paying taxes are usually the first to complain when the things funded by taxes stop working. When the roads are damaged, we get angry. When the internet infrastructure is terrible, we complain. When an ambulance arrives late, we get furious. But at the same time, we also say, why are you taking so much of my money? And that's the contradiction we're going to talk about today. Are taxes really just legalized theft? Or are they the price we pay to keep the modern world standing? And more importantly, if taxes disappeared tomorrow, would we actually become free? Or would society collapse into chaos within a few months? Taxes are actually older than governments themselves. Because the moment humans started living together, one big problem appeared. Who's going to pay for the shared stuff? A wall needs to be built. An army needs to be formed. The city needs protection. Roads need to be constructed. And eventually, someone probably stood up and said, why doesn't everyone contribute a little? That was most likely the birth of taxation. But throughout history, things sometimes became completely ridiculous. For example, in ancient Rome, people weren't just taxed on their income. Sometimes they were taxed on their possessions too. As the empire expanded, the military became more expensive. Palaces became larger. Luxury increased, and the state kept demanding more money. That part might sound strangely familiar, but one of the most absurd examples comes from Russia. In the 1700s, Peter the Great visited Europe one day and basically said, we've stayed too traditional. Then he returned home and introduced a beard tax. Yes, seriously. If you wanted to keep your beard, you had to pay taxes. If you didn't pay, they shaved it off. And that was just the beginning. At one point, England had something called a window tax. The more windows your house had, the more tax you paid. So what happened? People literally started bricking up their windows. And even today, if you see old buildings in Europe with strangely sealed windows, that might be the reason why. Because people realize something important. When governments need money, they can become incredibly creative. In fact, there were rebellions throughout history caused by salt taxes. Wars were sparked over tea taxes. One of the major reasons behind the American Revolutionary War was taxation itself. So taxes aren't just an economic issue. They're also about power. Because whoever collects the taxes usually controls the system too. So what would happen if taxes didn't exist at all? Now, let's be honest. Nobody wakes up thinking, I really want to pay more taxes today. But imagine a small experiment. Tomorrow morning, you wake up and taxes are completely abolished across the country. On the first day, everyone would be happy. Your salary feels bigger. Products get cheaper. Fuel prices drop. Companies relax. Sounds amazing. But what happens a few months later? Who's going to build the roads? Who funds the fire department? Public hospitals? Police? Dams? Electric infrastructure? Bridges? Because what we call a modern state is basically a massive machine. And that machine burns money. a lot of money. For an ambulance to operate, you don't just need the ambulance itself. You need doctors, fuel, roads, call centers, training, and all of that costs money. Sometimes people think, I don't want to pay taxes, but I still want the services. But math doesn't really work that way. If everyone in an apartment building stopped paying maintenance fees, sooner or later the elevator breaks down, cleaning stops, electrical problems start showing up. A state works a bit like that too. But here's the darker side of the story. Paying taxes does not guarantee good service. And this is where people's anger really begins. Because people usually aren't angry only about paying taxes. They get angry when they can't see where the money is going. So sometimes the real issue isn't the tax itself. It's trust. I'm giving this money, but is it actually coming back to me? And honestly, one of the biggest crises in modern societies is exactly that. There's a very old debate in economics. How much tax should a government collect? Because low taxes create problems, but high taxes do too. When taxes are too low, the state starts getting weaker. Education declines. Healthcare systems weaken. Infrastructure begins to fall apart. But when taxes become too high, something else happens. People start looking for ways out. Companies stop investing. Some move into the informal economy. Others leave for different countries. And the psychology of society starts to change. Because after a certain point, people begin to feel this. I'm working, but what I earn doesn't really feel like mine. And that is a very critical threshold. Economists sometimes call this tax psychology. People don't react only to the amount. They react to the feeling of fairness. For example, when someone makes millions and pays almost no taxes, while salaried workers carry a heavy burden, it creates serious anger in society because people can sometimes tolerate being poor, but they struggle much more with injustice. And throughout history, this was at the core of many uprisings. The French Revolution wasn't just about hunger. It was also about tax inequality. The lower classes were paying, while the upper classes lived with privileges. And eventually, the system exploded. What's interesting is that even today, countries still haven't fully solved. Balanced Northern European countries collect high taxes, yet people complain less. Why? Because they feel like they're getting something back in return. In some other countries, people may even pay lower taxes but still feel angry. Because the issue isn't just the numbers. It's trust, transparency, and the feeling of getting something back. So in the end, people are basically saying this. If you're taking money from me, at least make me feel where it's going. Taxes are probably one of those debates humanity will never fully solve. Because two things can be true at the same time. Yes, governments can sometimes misuse taxes. Yes, people can genuinely end up carrying a very heavy burden. But at the same time, this is also true. A modern society without taxes probably wouldn't survive for very long, because civilization has an invisible cost. We want roads. We want security. We want hospitals. We want internet infrastructure. We want a justice system. But none of these things appear out of nowhere. So maybe the real question isn't, why do taxes exist? Maybe the real question is, are we actually getting something back for what we give? Because most of the time, people aren't reacting to giving money. They're reacting to feeling deceived. And when you look at history, you notice something. Tax systems didn't just shape economies. They held entire empires together or brought them down. That's why taxes are not just an accounting issue. They're also a reflection of how much society trusts the state. And maybe this is where the real test of civilization begins. Are people willing to contribute? And is the state truly using that contribution for society? Because when that balance breaks, history shows us that the outcome usually isn't good. See you in the next video. Stay with science and reality. Goodbye.